Have you thought about buying a vacant piece of land and building a home on it? Maybe because you think it'll be cheaper, or maybe you want to build a custom home. Whatever the reason is, you're going to want to watch this video, because in this video, I'm going to get into the details of why you might want to consider if that's the right move for you. You're going to want to stick around because I've got a lot to share being a land expert. So we're getting after it right now. Hey, if you're new to our channel, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell so you can get our latest videos that we put out every week on Portland life. We cover a lot of aspects, a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of really good stuff. And we get calls, texts, and emails all the time from people looking to make the move to the Portland area. So if that's you, grab our contact information in the description below and give us a call, shoot us a text, or better yet, just call us up. We'd love to hop on a phone call with you or jump on a Zoom, talk about what your goals are, and help you make a smooth move to the Portland area. In today's video, we are talking all things lots and land. Now, why do I consider myself an expert? Well, I've been selling real estate for over 23 years right here in Portland, and I actually began my real estate career cutting my teeth on helping people buy lots and land. It just so happens when I got started in the business, I had a few customers that were all looking to build. In fact, one of the buyers that bought land ended up building for other people. So I learned along the way. I learned a lot along the way. And through the years, I do a lot of land sales. I know enough to be dangerous. I know how to counsel people up front. And that's a really big part of buying land, is knowing up front the questions to ask to make sure you know what it is you're doing. A lot of people have assumptions about buying raw land. They think it's going to be cheaper. They think it's super straightforward. They think it's going to be quick. And quite frankly, it's none of those. And so we're going to get into it today and piecemeal out detail by detail what you can expect if you're thinking about buying a raw piece of land. Anything from buying in the city, where maybe it has some public utilities to hook up to buying out in the country or an area that doesn't have all those utilities right there at the property. So the first thing we're going to get into is the money part, because when I talk to people about buying land, I need to know if they're paying cash or if they're gonna need financing. This is where a lot of people get hung up. A lot of people think you can just go down to any bank and get a land loan. Well, that is so far from the truth. In fact, what they find is there's very few banks that are gonna actually give you the money for land. Why is that? Because land is high risk for a bank. There's no structure on it. Maybe there's very few or limited utilities. So they're basically gonna give you a loan to hold on to a piece of property that only is the value in the land. There's no other structure on it. And maybe you are gonna build on it and they know that, but that is where you have to decide up front. Are you gonna build right away? Because you can look into what they call a construction permanent loan, where essentially you get qualified for a certain amount with the land involved and all the construction from soup to nuts. And you write a contract on the land. When you get to the closing table, that lender is going to pay out the amount of the lot. And then as you go along, you're gonna have allocations for paying out the contractor or the builder that you hire. So are you gonna get a construction permanent loan, or do you wanna buy it and hang on to it for a while so you can kind of figure out what you wanna do with the property? Some people just take a while. They wanna buy it and then in a couple of years build on it. So number one, cash is king when it comes to land sales, because that means you can close on it right away. There's not a lot of worries about where you're getting the loan from. If you need to go to the bank for financing, you need to be aware that you're gonna probably pay a higher interest rate on a bare piece of land, even if it has some utilities in it, because again, it's high risk. Anytime there's high risk, the bank's gonna always charge you more for that interest rate. Now, there's only 2 banks that I'm aware of at the time I'm doing this video that will give you a decent loan on land. There's a lot of banks out there that won't touch it. You'd be surprised. The 2 banks I can recommend right now are Banner Bank and First Tech. That's more of a local bank. But they can change. Sometimes these banks offer really great programs for land loans, and sometimes they pull back and choose not to loan on those. So always check with your lender. If you need a great recommendation on lenders, let me know. But essentially, you want to get your financing piece squared away before you ever begin your search, because it will determine how much you need to put down. A lot of banks want you to put down 25%, 35%. Sometimes they make you put down quite a bit because once again, we're talking about high risk and they want to make sure that you have enough skin in the game and they have enough equity in that piece of land that if something were to happen, they have something to show for it. So don't be surprised if you're going to pay a higher interest rate and you're going to put more money down. And again, if you're going to build right away, then that's kind of another type of financing and you have to do a lot in the way of getting ready for that loan. You can't just get a construction permanent loan. They're going to make you identify who your builder is going to be. They definitely have to be licensed and bonded. Some people can get away with getting a contractor involved, but they're gonna want you to itemize everything that you're gonna estimate for costs. And you always have to be mindful that things are gonna sometimes naturally run higher than what you expect when you go to build. And so you always wanna create a buffer in that. Don't go for the cheapest amount just so the bank loans you the cheapest, but they're gonna cross-check your estimate with the builder and decide, okay, we've qualified you up to X price. Can you buy the land, do all the improvements and build what you wanna build in that budget? Something to also be aware of is if you run over, let's say the bank says, I'm gonna give you $750,000 to buy the land, build everything. You don't qualify for a dime over that. If you get into a pickle and you end up building up to say 800,000 and it doesn't appraise, you will have to bring in the difference in cash because they're gonna say, nope, we qualified you up to 750. If it doesn't appraise at the 800 or what have you, you're gonna have to bring in the difference. So the very first thing you need to do is make sure you understand what financing you're gonna need if you need financing. If you're a cash buyer, you're on to the next step. Let's add one more thing to this, especially since we're talking about financing and pricing and cost. There's a couple different ways to go about building. Number one, a lot of people think of custom building. They wanna hire a custom builder to build them the house of their dreams. You are going to pay a lot for a custom builder. I want you to keep something in mind. Most custom builders will take 12 to 15% of your total build cost. So if you're gonna build $1 million house, add in 12 to 15% baked in that you're gonna have to pay your builder. They are customizing the house for you. They're building out the plans of the house you want. They're doing a lot of times, they're hiring all their subcontractors. They're making it custom to your needs, wants, and desires. And again, I always caution people that you're gonna build more than you think. It's gonna cost you more than you think. That's just how building goes. Costs can sometimes go up right in the middle of building. A couple years ago, in fact, when the timber prices were just, skyrocketing, even big builders that do subdivisions were adding in a clause to their sales agreements that, the cost of building was going up so fast on them that they could increase the price based on the additional costs. Now, we're not quite in that market anymore, but it's not to say that the builder couldn't come back and say, hey, you know what, this ended up costing more. I mean, we're definitely dealing with inflation nowadays, so it's not uncommon for things to be more expensive, but just understand that a lot of times things do cost more and you may wanna make changes because you're building your dream home. And so just be aware that those additional costs can add up. Now, on the flip side, if you're really looking for an economical build, which a lot of people are, they wanna buy a piece of land because they want to keep costs down. It's not impossible to do, but you need to be very strategic. And there's a couple of companies out there that I'd recommend. One is called Highline Home and one is called Adair. And these are prefabricated homes. There is nothing wrong with them. My stepbrother went through Highline Homes and his house is beautiful. It was a cute little one level. And the reason why it's more economical is because you can go into their showrooms and you can look around at the different floor plans they offer, at the different price points they offer. You can do, 1,500 square feet, 1,200 square feet, 2,500 square feet. And then they give you a budget based on each one of those. And it's kind of a builder's grade, meaning this doesn't come with a bunch of upgrades. You would have to add on the cost for any upgrades. But people like that because you can go into those floor plans and say, okay, I'm gonna buy this house that's 2,000 square feet for $220,000. My lot price is 200, so now I'm in at 450. Now the pricing doesn't stop there because you need to take into consideration utilities and excavating, meaning prepping the land. So let's talk about utilities as the next one. Utilities has to be factored into cost. So as I mentioned before, if somebody is selling a piece of raw land and they've already done all the prep work, they've gotten in the well and the septic if it's in an area that doesn't have public utilities, or maybe the utilities are public and they're right there ready to plug into, you're really just paying connection fees. That will make the lot more attractive for people, and the cost is already baked in, so people tend to sell those properties for more. But let's say you find a vacant lot that doesn't have any of that, and you're looking at adding in a septic system or a well. Let's talk about how those work. So with a raw piece of land, let's say you find something out that doesn't have public utilities, you're going to need to do a septic testing on the property. They dig some some holes, and they find out where the water levels are on the property. And based on that, they tell you if you can have a gravity septic or a sand filtration system. And that's important because number one, it tells you, okay, you can have a septic system on this property, but it tells you the type. So if it's in a high water level area, you're probably looking at putting a sand filtration system in. If you're looking at a standard soil piece of land, a gravity system. Now, a gravity system is going to be a lot less expensive than a sand filtration system. And again, I'm going to quote some ranges of price. Do not hold me to it because prices change all the time. But in my experience looking at a typical gravity fed septic, depending on the size of gallons, 500 or 1,000 gallon tank, and obviously depending on the size of house you're going to build. But you can look at putting in a septic system pretty easily around $20,000. Not hard to spend that kind of money on putting in a normal septic system. If you're going to go with sand filtration, it's going to go higher than that. And of course, that includes excavating, tank, putting in your drain fields, the whole 9 yards. So again, you always want to get bids from septic companies if you're going to put in a septic, because obviously depending on the topography and the land and so many other factors that can play into pricing. So I'm giving you a ballpark just so you can kind of put that in your mind, like, okay, if I found a regular gravity septic, the range could be somewhere around 20,000. I've seen them be cheaper than that, and I've seen them be more expensive than that. So again, don't hold me accountable to the exact number, but I'm throwing out a ballpark because I think people are always curious, what does something like that cost? Now let's go to the well. The well is a big difference because when you're going to buy a piece of raw land, you need to make sure that that piece of land has water. And you get inspections, just like a resale home. You get to have like a home inspection or a contingency time frame to determine what you can do with the property, going down to the county, and then of course making sure that it does have the ability to have a well on it. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because if it doesn't currently have a well or it's not been tested for a well, you might be forking out some money as a buyer to test to see how far down do you have to go to get water, and you don't own the land yet. So yes, I've had some clients who really want a piece of land and they're willing to spend the money to find out, does it have well water at a certain level? I've seen people spend $10,000 during their inspection contingency to dig down to see if they have the well water that they need. Why would they do that? Why would they spend all that money before they even own it? Because you don't want to buy a piece of property, a raw piece of land that doesn't have the ability to give you potable drinking water. And so one of the risks of moving forward on raw land, determining if it has the ability to get a well on it, is sometimes spending several $1,000s to get a well company out there to dig down until they find water. Sometimes you find it, not too many feet down, and other times you have to dig really deep and they charge you to find out how far down you can go. So when you buy raw land with no well on it existing, this is a little bit where it gets tricky for you to spend that kind of money to determine if it has potable drinking water at a certain point. Now, everything's negotiable in real estate, so sometimes you can have the seller, you can negotiate directly with the seller on maybe paying half of it or paying towards closing costs or whatever. Again, that all depends case by case, but just something to be really aware of if you're looking to buy raw land. Now, if you find a city lot that's really close to public utilities, makes it a little easier, but you want to just double check where those utilities are so you can sort of find out what the connection fees are. You can call the utility companies and find out, hey, this is the property I'm buying. Here's the tax ID number. Here's the address if they already have one. A lot of raw lots don't have an address just yet, but you can give them the tax ID number or the location of it and they can find it. And you can ask them, where is the connection point and what's the estimated cost to hook up to power, sewer, and water. And they should be able to give you an idea or have an appointment to come out and look at it and give you that estimate. Now, if water, power, and sewer are 100 feet away or longer, your costs are gonna go way, way up. So part of your due diligence during your inspection contingency and buying land is learning about all these things. I have a checklist that I take my clients through as we're looking at evaluating land so that we know what we need to look into in order to feel comfortable moving forward past contingencies. Because it's not like a resale house where you're just doing a home inspection and once that's over with and negotiated, you're onward. You're kind of doing your own due diligence as a buyer, making sure that when you buy this piece of property, you know what utilities are at the property, what may you have to bring in, can you build on the property the way you want to build on it, and all kinds of other questions that you'd be asking the county or the city at the time of your contingency. Something I highly recommend everybody does is not just call the county or the city where the jurisdiction for the property is, but physically go down there and talk to them. You will learn so much more about the property. You'll get belly to belly with the person at the county or the city that can pull up the records of the property, look at them with you and tell you, you know what, here's the setbacks, here's the environmental overlays. Oh, by the way, did you know you had to do X, Y, and Z to the property if you decide you're going to develop it? Where certain things are on the property that might be prudent for you to know about. I mean, there are so many questions you can ask these people. On the phone, you may not get the full scoop. Sometimes you're leaving a message for the county and then somebody calls you back on a whim and you're not prepared to ask all the right questions. So I always recommend people take the time to go down to the county or the city, just bring your plat map of the property, bring your Trio, which is kind of showing your plat maps and all the details that you can possibly pull on it, and really dive in with somebody down at the county so that they can show you so much more about that particular lot. And you need to make sure that if you're going to build on that property, that you can build what you want to build, or if they foresee anything that would be a challenge. Now, sometimes you come across a lot or piece of land or acreage that you just quite frankly don't know going into it, even talking to the county, what you can and can't do with it. They may ask you to fill out an application and run it through their engineering department or go through a process that can take a little bit of time and quite frankly, sometimes some money to determine if you can do what you want to do with the land. But it's so worth it to find out as much as you can and sometimes pay some money so that you're not buying a piece of property that you can't do what you want with it. Now, a lot of properties will be straightforward once you talk to the county about what you can and can't do with it. But let's say you want to buy a property and divide up the lot and sell it to your family member and have them build a house or a shop or whatever. You just need to make sure that you can do what you want to do with it. And if there are question marks about the property as far as what you can do with it or can't do with it, you would want to know those before purchasing and closing. The next thing you need to be aware of, since we've talked about financing, is what is the range you can expect to pay for land, a vacant lot or an acreage property? Now, it's obviously going to run the gamut because depending on the location around Portland that you're looking in, or the size of the lot, and it also depends on the slope of the land, the geography. Does it include some utilities? Obviously, you're going to pay more for a piece of property where maybe the owner has already put in septic, well, or it's right at the street, where you can plug into city sewer and water. But let's just talk generically about prices, because I think it always surprises people how much you're going to have to pay for a piece of land. It's not cheap, I'm going to tell you that right now. The one thing I can tell you, and you might have heard this in other videos, is that we talk a lot about the urban growth boundary, which is that imaginary circle that goes all the way around the Portland metro area. And they really, outside of that boundary line is farms typically and acreage properties. And what we can't do is go do urban sprawl. So we can't go run out to, say, a farmer and say, oh, hey, you have 30 acres. Can I just buy, 2 acres from you and make a lot? You can't do that. Typically. It doesn't mean that there isn't some zoning, around certain properties that allow you to do that. But for the most part, you're finding properties inside the urban growth boundary, or you're buying acreage properties as they are. And so let's just talk about acreage properties for a moment. It's very desirable to buy acreage property, bare land. I sold a piece of property a couple years ago to give you some perspective out in the Shoals area of Beaverton, where there's a lot of construction happening. And this was a beautiful 8-acre property, mostly flat, but had some, slopage to it. And where you could build was right up front. And the owner had gone through all the costs and processes to put in the septic and put in the well. And that's a big deal, because if you know how much those things typically run, you've got to do soil samples, you've got to do well digs, and it can sometimes run you quite a bit of money for each of those. So he had gotten the land all prepared. So essentially whoever buys it could get easier financing, because some banks do like it when you already have a well and a septic on it. Much easier to get financing from, more banks. And you can start right away, and that cost is already, baked into the price of the lot. So that property sold for about $700,000. There was no structures on it, but it did have an amazing piece of property with a country setting close into town, just in the group outside the urban growth boundary, kind of where some of the farmlands is, but again, really close to inside. So 8 acres, fairly flat where you build, septic and well in, and there was also power nearby. And that was just right outside the urban growth boundary, really close into some amenities. So that gives you some perspective on that. Now, if you buy within the city, so let's say you're looking in Multnomah County or you're looking in the greater Portland area, a lot of times people want flat lots. Kind of tricky to find actually in Portland. Not that you can't find it, but the more flat the lot, the more expensive it's gonna, or more expensive it's gonna be. There are some properties up in the northwest, southwest hills that have amazing views, and they're not quite flat. Maybe they're sloped or pretty sloped. I've sold a few of those. And they require more geotech. They require more engineering, if you will, to make those properties the way you need them to be. And those properties are still expensive. You can expect to pay $300,000 to up $500,000 or $600,000 in some cases, depending on the location. If you're in a prime location, let's say Lake Oswego, Oregon, Westland, Oregon, Southwest Portland, where maybe there's views, or in a really good neighborhood, Northwest Portland, anything with a view up in Northwest Portland, it's not uncommon to see land prices be in the 3s, 4s, 5s, 6. I've even seen them as high as the 7s up there, because you're paying for location and you typically build, this is key, listen up, you're gonna build 3.5 times what you pay for the land. This is huge. So whatever the price is for the land you pay, always budget for 3.5 times what you pay for the land is what your build costs are gonna be. And so just keep that in mind as you're surfing around for properties. So a lot of times people kind of tap out when I tell them just that what I shared with you, which is, wow, it's gonna cost me $400,000 just for a vacant lot? Yeah, it could, especially if it's in a primo area around Portland in primo neighborhoods. Now there are exceptions, obviously. So if you're further out, or let's say somebody is selling off a 1/4 acre or less, and it's within, a city like a suburb, Sherwood, Tigard, Oregon City, things like that. Sure, you can find them around $250,000, $300,000, but I would tell you that if anything is less than $250,000, you may be looking at something that has some challenges to it. So a lot of times price and location will determine, is there an issue? Now, land is all different. You can approach 3 different pieces of land or lots, all about $300,000 to $350,000, and they're all gonna have something unique about them. Maybe there's environmental overlay, so there's only one little area you can build on the property and it's not ideal. Maybe you have to build in the back of the property and put a big long road in, and let me tell you, that's gonna add substantial cost if you have to lay down road, excavate the road, or put pavement down, or maybe you choose to leave it gravel. Or maybe there is just setbacks that come into play that you have to be really mindful of. So the footprint of the house that you're looking to put on the property might be kind of squished down. You might be like, oh, I can't build my big, beautiful 1 level. I can only build a 2-story because the county's saying it only allows me to build on a certain footprint of that lot. So every lot, you have to look at it case by case and decide, what can I build on it? Does it fit my goals? And is there anything with the lot that keeps me from either building on it or building what I want on it? And so those are all really important things to keep in mind that play into cost. So just keep that in mind, that if you are looking at pricing, that all these factors come into play, and it really is case by case when looking at lots. Well, we covered a lot today regarding buying lots, lands, vacant properties, acreage. Hopefully you got some really good insight, and there's certainly always more to talk about, especially if you get into this process and you start looking at different properties. Each property, as I said before, is unique and is case by case, and sometimes what seems like a really good property, after you get down the road a little bit, you realize it's just not the right fit, or it's not going to be able to do what you want to do with it. But that is really where it's important to go into this with eyes wide open and hire somebody that knows what they're doing to help and assist you. If you're looking to buy land, acreage, vacant properties, or have questions, I'm here and available. All of our contact information is in the description below. So whether you're making the move in 9 days or 90 days, don't hesitate to reach out. I jump on Zoom calls with people all the time. I take phone calls. I get text messages and emails. So any of those formats works great for us. And we hope to see you on the next few videos, as we are constantly putting out great information about Portland life, living, buying, moving, relocating. We appreciate that you stayed this long to watch the video, and we'll see you on the next one.